Welcome to Module 1, the foundation for everything we'll cover this year in sustainable food systems and the circular economy. Think about your last meal, where it came from, how it was produced, and what happened to it afterward. In this module, we'll zoom out to the big picture, looking at the challenges our food system faces and the tools we can use to redesign it for the future. The guiding question is, how can we design food systems that respect planetary limits while advancing global well-being? What you learn here will connect back to later modules and to real decisions in agriculture and daily life. Here's our roadmap. Lesson A, Why Food Systems Matter. We'll connect planetary boundaries and the UN Sustainable Development Goals to agriculture and food production. Lesson B, From Linear to Circular. We'll explore how to redesign food systems to be restorative and regenerative. Lesson C, Pathways to Action. We'll discuss solutions from individual choices to global policies. By the end, you'll see how these lessons fit together to give us a systems-level understanding of food. Throughout this module, we'll keep coming back to one essential question. How can food systems respect planetary limits while improving lives? To start, think about why food systems matter for the future of both people and the planet. Food isn't just calories. It's tied to health, climate, jobs, land, and culture. For people, it connects to fair wages, nutrition, and access. For the planet, it's about land, water, biodiversity, and emissions. And for profit, it's about keeping farming and food affordable and viable. The key is balance. Food systems only work when people, planet, and profit overlap. To see this in action, we'll do a quick activity. Write one word under people, planet, or profit that food impacts most, and together we'll look at the patterns and where these pillars intersect. A sustainable food system isn't just about the food on your plate. It's about making sure food is produced, distributed, and consumed in ways that support people, protect the planet, and remain economically viable. If even one of those pillars is missing, social, environmental, or economic, the system becomes unstable. When you hear the word sustainable, what comes to mind? Maybe recycling, renewable energy, or saving resources. Now think about food. A sustainable system feeds everyone today with safe, healthy, and affordable meals, while protecting our ability to feed people tomorrow by caring for soils, water, farmers, and ecosystems. To test this, let's take your favorite meal, pizza, burgers, sushi, anything, and ask, does it meet the people, planet, profit test? Does it feed people fairly, respect the environment, and stay affordable for farmers and consumers? Sustainable food systems rest on three interconnected foundations: people, planet, and profit. And true sustainability means balancing all three. People is about fairness, nutrition, and well-being. Planet is about protecting soil, water, climate, and biodiversity. And profit is about keeping farms and businesses economically viable. If one pillar is missing, the system eventually fails. For example, chasing profit without protecting planet depletes resources, or prioritizing people and planet without profit makes farming financially impossible. To see this in action, in small groups imagine a food system where one P is missing and discuss 1 to 2 real-world consequences. Then we'll share a few examples together. The key takeaway: sustainability only works when people, planet, and profit stay in balance. The Planetary Boundaries framework shows us the limits we need to stay within for Earth to remain stable and habitable, things like climate, biodiversity, land use, freshwater, and nutrient cycles. Scientists warn that 6 of the 9 boundaries have already been crossed, and food systems are a big driver. Farming and ranching release major emissions, cropland expansion destroys habitats, and fertilizer overuse pollutes water with nitrogen and phosphorus, creating dead zones. For example, the same nitrogen that boosts crop yields can wash into rivers and fuel algae blooms that kill fish. The key idea is that our food choices are directly linked to these overshoots. But if we redesign food systems, we can also help pull back into Earth's safe space. To make it personal, let's look at the planetary boundaries diagram and ask, which boundary do you think your lunch impacts most? Food systems are one of the largest human footprints on Earth, driving changes to land, climate, water, and biodiversity. Half of all habitable land is already used for crops and pasture. About a quarter of global greenhouse gases come from food production and waste, and expanding farmland is the leading cause of deforestation and biodiversity loss. On top of that, fertilizer runoff creates dead zones in rivers and oceans. This planetary boundaries chart shows how food pushes us past safe limits, especially in land use, nutrient cycles, and biodiversity. To think critically about solutions, let's do a quick poll. Which of these impacts do you think is most urgent to fix: land use, climate change, biodiversity loss, or nutrient pollution? Every bite of food connects to the bigger picture of global sustainability, which is why the UN created the Sustainable Development Goals, targets for ending hunger, protecting the planet, and building healthy economies. Food is central to nearly all of them. It shapes land use, contributes about a quarter of global greenhouse gas emissions, drives deforestation and biodiversity loss, and causes nutrient pollution through fertilizer runoff. The SDGs remind us that what we eat, how we farm, and how we manage waste affects not just the environment, but also jobs, health, and equity. To spark discussion, think about your favorite meal. How many of the SDGs might it touch, from zero hunger to climate action to good health and well being? Food is more than personal, it's political, social, and environmental, which is why it connects to nearly all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. Ending hunger, improving health, protecting water, taking climate action, and conserving ecosystems all run through the way we grow, distribute, and consume food. Even goals like gender equality, decent work, and reducing inequalities tie back to farming and food access. That's why food systems are considered an accelerator. Redesigning them can move us closer to achieving the entire SDG agenda by 2030. To make this real, let's look at the SDG wheel. Pick one goal and explain how you think it connects to food, and we'll see how every bite has global consequences. A burger isn't just a patty on a bun, it represents an entire supply chain of farming, water, energy, labor, and ecosystems. Wheat is grown for the bun. Soy and corn are grown to feed cattle, and the cattle themselves require vast amounts of water and land while producing methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. Trucks, tractors, and cold storage all use fossil fuels, adding more emissions, while ranching often replaces forests and reduces biodiversity. Along the way, wages and profits are uneven, from farm workers to fast food employees, and access to healthy alternatives remains unequal. Even one burger carries a global footprint, but multiplied by billions, the impact is enormous. To test your understanding, let's do a quick poll. Which part of a burger has the biggest environmental footprint? The bun, the cheese, or the beef? Redesigning food systems isn't about fixing one issue at a time. It moves many sustainable development goals forward together. When we improve how food is grown, distributed, and consumed, we reduce hunger and diet-related disease, protect water, climate, and biodiversity, and create fairer jobs and supply chains. Smarter farming practices, fair pricing, and reducing waste also make cities cleaner, communities healthier, and businesses more resilient. That's why the UN calls food system transformation a cornerstone of the 2030 Agenda. Every step we take in making food more sustainable is a step toward a healthier planet and a fairer society. You've probably heard the claim that we need to double food production by 2050 to feed a growing population. But this scare line is misleading. The usual response has been to expand mega farms, use more chemicals, and clear more land, choices that harm ecosystems and climate. The truth is we already grow enough calories to feed the world. The real issues are waste, inefficiency, and unequal access. If we reduce food loss, shift diets, and improve distribution, we don't need to double production at all. We need to redesign the system to make better use of what we already have. By 2050, the global population will reach nearly 10 billion, and with rising incomes, diets will shift, especially toward more meat and animal protein. While meat demand may grow by about 70%, the actual increase in total calories needed is closer to 50%, not the full doubling often claimed. The double food scare line assumes business as usual, the same diets, the same waste, the same inefficiencies. But if we reduce waste and shift consumption, we don't need to simply produce more. The challenge is smarter management, not linear expansion, because if we just scale up the old system, we'll repeat the same mistakes with even bigger consequences. The truth is, the world doesn't face a food production crisis, it faces a food system crisis. Globally, we already grow about 1.5 times more calories than what 10 billion people would need. But so much is wasted, misused, or unevenly distributed that hunger persists. Roughly a third of all food is lost along the supply chain, and much of the grain we do grow gets fed to livestock, where 100 calories of grain may return only 3 as beef, 12 as chicken, or 22 as eggs. At the same time, some communities suffer food insecurity while others overconsume and waste. The real challenge isn't producing more, but managing food more wisely, cutting waste, rethinking diets, and ensuring access so we can feed the future without pushing past planetary limits. The real solution isn't just to produce more food, but to produce and consume smarter. We already grow enough calories to feed everyone. The real challenge is what happens between the farm and the fork. Roughly a third of food is lost or wasted, whether it's spoiled during storage and transport in regions with weak infrastructure, or thrown away by consumers in wealthier countries. At the same time, a large share of crops goes into inefficient uses like livestock feed, where many calories are lost in conversion to meat. By tackling waste and shifting diets toward more plant-based foods, we could free up land, cut greenhouse gases, and protect ecosystems, all while feeding billions more people without clearing new farmland or overloading the planet's resources. Doubling food production the old way would be a disaster. It would mean clearing forests, wiping out biodiversity, pouring on more chemicals, and locking us into a climate spiral, all while still failing to solve hunger because the real problems are waste and inequality. Simply scaling up the old system only deepens the crisis. The smarter path forward is transformation. Regenerative farming that restores soils and ecosystems, circular economy approaches that turn waste into resources, and shifts in diets and food use that let us feed more people with less damage. The choice is clear: producing smarter, not just more, is the only way to build a food system that lasts. This activity is about seeing the hidden impacts of our everyday meals. Take a quick inventory of your lunch or a favorite meal. Write it down or use a photo if you have one. For each item, think about its footprint, where it came from, what resources went into producing it, and what waste is left behind. For example, a cheeseburger involves beef that requires land, water, and emits methane, a bun from grain grown with fertilizer, cheese from dairy production, and plastic packaging that becomes waste. Identify at least 3 major impacts of your meal: climate, land, water, biodiversity, or waste. Then share your findings in a small group before we highlight key insights together. The point is simple: every bite counts, and once we see the bigger picture, we can start to make smarter, more sustainable choices. Let's wrap up with a quick review. First, what are the 3 pillars of a sustainable food system? Remember, people, planet, and profit, and leaving out any one of them destabilizes the whole system. Second, which planetary boundaries are most stressed by modern food systems? Think about climate change, biodiversity loss, nutrient cycles, land use, freshwater, and even novel entities like plastics. All of these are pushed past safe limits. Finally, what's the flaw in the claim that we must double food by 2050? The world already produces enough calories. The real challenges are waste, inefficiency, and unequal access. Smarter solutions come from reducing waste, shifting diets, and redesigning systems to be regenerative and circular. The 3 pillars of a sustainable food system are people, planet, and profit, and all must work together, because ignoring even one risks food insecurity, ecosystem damage, or economic collapse. Modern food systems are also responsible for pushing several planetary boundaries past safe limits, including climate change, biodiversity loss, nutrient pollution, land use change, freshwater depletion, and novel entities like plastics, all of which destabilize Earth's systems. Finally, the idea that we must double food production by 2050 is flawed, since we already produce about 1.5 times the calories needed. The real issue is waste and diet inefficiencies. Smarter alternatives like cutting food loss, shifting diets, and farming in regenerative ways can feed billions more without clearing additional land. Lesson B challenges us to rethink food production. Instead of asking how we grow more, we ask how we grow smarter so nothing goes to waste. Right now, most food systems are linear. Resources go in, products come out, and waste piles up, leaving behind lost nutrients, pollution, and degraded ecosystems. But nature doesn't work this way. In a forest, everything cycles back, with waste becoming the next input. Our challenge is to design food systems that work more like ecosystems, where food scraps become compost, nutrients return to the soil, packaging is reused or biodegradable, and farming restores rather than depletes. This is the idea of a circular economy, shifting from take, make, waste to reuse, recycle, regenerate. Done right, it cuts pollution and emissions, protects forests and biodiversity, and builds resilience by reusing what we already have. A linear food system works like a one-way street. We take, we make, and we waste. We extract soil nutrients, pump water, and burn fossil fuels to grow and process food. We transform those resources into burgers, snacks, and packaging. And then we throw away scraps, plastic, and nutrients that could have been recycled. The result is pollution in our air, soil, and water, greenhouse gases from livestock and landfills, and lost nutrients that weaken ecosystems. This take-make-waste treadmill treats food as if it exists outside of nature's cycles. But ecosystems don't work that way. In a forest, leaves become soil, and in rivers, decay fuels new life. Our current linear model breaks those natural loops, leaving us with more waste and fewer resources. The challenge ahead is how to redesign food systems so they mimic nature cycles instead of fighting against them. The waste meter shows just how inefficient our food system really is. Every second, the world wastes the equivalent of 6 garbage trucks of edible food, perfectly good crops, and meals lost from farms to households. Less than 2% of the nutrients in discarded food ever makes it back to soils. Instead, most are buried or burned, while agriculture keeps drawing on new fertilizers and mined minerals to replace what's lost. This is like trying to fill a bathtub without a drain plug. We keep pouring in resources, only to let them slip away as waste and pollution. It's a clear signal that the linear model is broken, and the only way forward is to redesign the system so waste is no longer the default. The circular economy flips our current food system on its head by turning waste into opportunity and designing loops that mimic nature. Instead of the linear model of take, make, waste, a circular food system works like a forest, where leaves decompose to feed new growth and nothing is thrown away. In practice, that means keeping food scraps and manure toxin-free, so they can be composted, cycling nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus back into soils instead of letting them pollute rivers, and reusing or recycling packaging and materials. The result is fewer landfills, lower emissions, healthier soils and ecosystems, and more resilient food systems that regenerate rather than deplete. In short, circular means cycle, regenerate, reuse. Every output becomes a new input. In a circular food system, waste is no longer waste, it's raw material for the next cycle. Food scraps can become compost to enrich soils, biogas to generate renewable energy, or even animal feed, while byproducts like fruit pulp can be transformed into bioplastics and used cooking oil can be turned into biodiesel. The circular model has 2 loops: the biological cycle, where organics like food and paper safely return to nature through composting or anaerobic digestion, and the technical cycle, where durable materials like plastics or metals are reused, repaired, or recycled instead of discarded. This approach keeps organic waste out of landfills, reduces methane emissions, cuts demand for new raw materials, and creates new economic opportunities, all while restoring ecosystems by putting nutrients back into the soil. The 5 R's capture how we move from waste management to true system redesign: reduce, reuse, recycle, refurbish, and regenerate. In a circular food system, that means cutting inputs like fertilizer or packaging, keeping products in circulation through reuse, recycling materials like plastics or paper, extending the life of tools and equipment through repair, and most importantly, regenerating soils, water cycles, and biodiversity so ecosystems actually improve over time. Together, these principles create a closed loop where nutrients and materials keep flowing, farms are powered by renewables, and ecosystems are restored as an outcome rather than an afterthought. The big shift is this: instead of asking how to manage waste after it's made, we redesign the system so waste never appears in the first place. Industrial farming often runs like a factory with fertilizers, pesticides, and fuel going in and crops or livestock coming out. But this approach weakens soils, pollutes water, and drains ecosystems. Agroecology and regenerative agriculture flip the script by treating farms as living ecosystems that work with nature instead of against it. Agroecology applies ecological principles, planting diverse crops for resilience, recycling organic matter for soil fertility, and using natural pest control, while regenerative agriculture goes a step further, aiming to leave the land better each year by rebuilding soils, repairing water cycles, and boosting biodiversity. Together, they show us that farming can be more than just producing food. It can actively restore ecosystems and build resilience in the face of climate change. Agroecology turns theory into practice by designing farms that function like ecosystems, cycling nutrients, supporting biodiversity, and restoring soil and water. Farmers use crop rotation and cover crops to keep soils fertile and protected. And they integrate livestock with crops so that manure becomes a resource rather than waste. Composting food scraps and crop residues replaces synthetic fertilizers, while beneficial insects or microbes reduce the need for chemical pesticides. Polycultures, growing several crops together, boost biodiversity and resilience so that if one crop fails, others can still thrive. Each of these practices creates loops that keep resources cycling, and together they transform a farm into a self-regenerating system that produces food while improving the land. Regenerative farming shows that agriculture doesn't have to harm ecosystems. It can actually heal them. The goal isn't just to sustain, but to improve the land every year. Practices like building soil carbon lock away carbon dioxide and create rich, living soils. Improving water cycles turns farms into sponges that absorb rain and resist droughts and floods. Restoring ecosystems with hedgerows, cover crops, and wildflower strips supports pollinators and biodiversity, and managed grazing, where livestock rotate across pastures, revives grasslands instead of exhausting them. Together, these practices rebuild the foundations of food production, soil, water, and ecosystems, making farms healthier and more resilient. As we watch the video, notice how these techniques flip the usual story. Instead of depleting land, regenerative agriculture restores it. The real breakthrough happens when circular economy principles and nature-based farming come together. That's when the perfect loop emerges. Circular design eliminates waste, keeps resources cycling, and regenerates natural systems, while practices like agroecology and regenerative farming restore soils, water, and biodiversity. In this model, waste becomes a resource. Manure, crop husks, and food scraps turn into compost, fertilizer, or even energy, and reliance on costly synthetic inputs is reduced. Farmers take the lead by applying ecological knowledge to their own land instead of being locked into one-size-fits-all solutions. The result is long-term resilience, healthier soils, cleaner water, empowered communities, and food systems strong enough to withstand climate and market shocks. When circular design meets nature-based solutions, we get food systems that waste less, restore more, and thrive over time. The combo framework reminds us that no single approach can fix food systems on its own. The real power comes from combining regenerative agriculture, agroecology, and circular economy. Regenerative practices rebuild soils, restore water cycles, and bring back biodiversity so land grows healthier each year. Agroecology applies ecological science and local knowledge, treating farms as ecosystems with diverse crops, nutrient cycling, and farmer-led solutions adapted to place. Circular economy design closes the loop, eliminating waste and keeping resources in use through reuse, recycling, and regeneration. Together, these approaches flip the system from one that extracts and discards to one that renews and regenerates, producing more food on healthier land, with stronger ecosystems and more resilient communities. In Sicily, citrus farming produces mountains of leftover peels from lemons, oranges, and other fruits that used to rot in piles, releasing methane and costing farmers money to dispose of. The circular solution reimagined those peels as a resource. They're now dried, milled, and processed into high-fiber cattle feed pellets. This simple shift cuts landfill waste, reduces methane emissions, and replaces expensive grain feed for ranchers, turning what was once trash into value for both farmers and livestock producers. It's a perfect example of a circular loop in action. Nutrients that would have been lost are cycled back into the food system, lowering costs, reducing pollution, and strengthening local food chains. Sicily's citrus superloop shows how one crop can be transformed into multiple valuable products instead of producing waste. From the same peel, processors extract essential oils for perfumes, cleaning products, and flavorings, then dry the leftover pulp into nutritious animal feed pellets for ranchers, and even feed residues into anaerobic digesters to produce renewable biogas. The result is a near-zero waste system where every part of the citrus fruit has a purpose. This circular chain cuts waste, creates new revenue streams, supports local ranchers with cheaper feed, and generates clean energy for communities. It's a powerful example of how regional waste can be turned into regional value, making food systems both more sustainable and more profitable. Distilleries generate tons of wet spent grain after fermentation, which usually costs money to haul away and can cause odor and pest problems. But in Kentucky, researchers and farmers turned that waste into a win for everyone. Oyster mushrooms thrive on spent grain, transforming it into a productive growing medium that yields a gourmet crop worth $15 to $25 a pound. After the mushrooms are harvested, the leftover material can still be fed to livestock or composted to enrich soils, meaning nothing goes to waste. Distilleries save on disposal costs, growers gain a valuable income stream, and communities get access to fresh, protein-rich food. It's a perfect example of circular innovation. Spent grain becomes mushrooms, then livestock feed or compost, and finally returns nutrients back to the soil, closing the loop. The endless loop mindset shows that there's no shortage of solutions, only a shortage of imagination. Across the food system, what looks like waste can be transformed into value. Bakeries send stale bread to breweries that turn it into beer. Farms feed manure and scraps into digesters that generate electricity and fertilizer. Rejected produce becomes juice or snacks. And cities collect food scraps for compost to enrich urban gardens. Each of these loops captures resources that would otherwise be lost, creating new products, cutting costs, reducing emissions, and strengthening communities. Circular thinking turns every waste stream into an opportunity, proving that the food system can be an opportunity factory if we design it that way. The payoff from circular food systems is huge. Globally, they could unlock $2.7 trillion a year by 2050, while slashing the hidden costs of food, like soil depletion, polluted water, climate damage, and healthcare expenses. Farmers save money by reusing resources. Communities benefit from cleaner water and healthier diets, and new local businesses can emerge from what used to be waste. But the real innovation starts right here in our own school. Think about the byproducts around us: cafeteria scraps, orange peels, leftover cooking oil, or even landscaping waste. In small groups, brainstorm one creative circular use for each. Maybe compost for the school garden, biodiesel for buses, or natural cleaning products. Who can come up with the most inventive idea? The next citrus peel or grain to mushroom solution. Systems thinking is about stepping back and seeing the whole picture, not just the parts, but how they connect and create ripple effects. For example, adding fertilizer doesn't only change soil nutrients, it also affects water quality, greenhouse gases, and farm economics. Choosing beef instead of beans isn't just a diet choice. It impacts land use, climate, and biodiversity. The goal of systems thinking is to design solutions that strengthen the entire system rather than cause new problems. Nature gives us the perfect blueprint. In ecosystems, nothing is wasted. Every output becomes someone else's input. By studying forests, rivers, and soils, we see how nutrients cycle endlessly. And that model shows us how to design food systems that are truly circular and regenerative. Systems thinking gives us tools to spot patterns and design smarter solutions. Four concepts are especially important for food systems: feedback loops, where actions reinforce or weaken future outcomes; system archetypes, like the tragedy of the commons or quick fix, shifting the burden traps; leverage points, where small shifts like reducing food waste or starting school composting create big ripple effects; and unintended consequences, like clearing forests for cattle that boost short-term beef but causes long-term climate and biodiversity loss. By paying attention to these patterns, we can anticipate problems, avoid hidden trade-offs, and focus on changes that strengthen the whole system instead of patching just one part. The big idea is to start asking, where are the loops? Where are the leverage points? And how can we design food systems that avoid collapse and keep regenerating? Linear food systems use resources once and throw them away, while circular systems keep resources cycling and regenerate nature instead of depleting it. Think about how ecosystems work. In a forest, nothing is wasted. Leaves decompose into soil, animals recycle nutrients, and every output becomes an input for something else. Now, let's apply that lens to something as ordinary as your school lunch. Where did the ingredients come from? What resources were needed to grow and transport them? And what happens to the leftovers, packaging, or scraps? Could those wastes be redesigned into compost, reusable packaging, or even energy? Take a couple of minutes to sketch or imagine your lunch as a linear chain, then flip it into a circular loop. This exercise shows that circular design doesn't just live in theory, it can start right here, with the food on our plates. Nature is the ultimate circular economy. In ecosystems, there is no waste. Every output becomes an input. Fallen leaves decompose into nutrients that feed new growth. Fungi connect plant roots to share water and carbon, and bees pollinate flowers while collecting nectar, creating a loop that sustains entire ecosystems. These natural cycles show us how systems can thrive for thousands of years without depletion. The lesson is simple but powerful. Nothing is wasted, because what looks like waste in one part of the system is always food, fuel, or fertilizer for another. If we design our food systems the same way, Cycling byproducts back into use and reintegrating nutrients, we can build resilience and regeneration into our farms and communities, just as nature has done for millennia. Nature proves that circular systems work. They've sustained life on Earth for millions of years by keeping nutrient cycling, populations balanced, and ecosystems resilient. Humans, by contrast, broke away from that model with linear systems that take, use, and discard, leaving behind degraded soils, polluted water, and a destabilized climate. The lesson is clear. If nature can reuse everything, so can we. By copying closed-loop patterns, food systems can turn waste into compost, feed or energy, keep nutrients in circulation, and restore ecosystems instead of depleting them. Farmers can design fields that mimic forests, cities can cycle scraps back into soil, and communities can align diet, innovation, and policy to close loops. This is the essence of the circular economy, designing human systems to work as efficiently and regeneratively as nature itself. Coffee waste proves that no material is useless. It's just waiting to be reimagined. Every day, cafes produce tons of used coffee grounds that usually end up in landfills, releasing methane as they rot. But in a circular system, those grounds become resources. Collected, dried, and transformed into mushroom growing kits for schools and restaurants, or into bioplastic pellets that can be molded into reusable cups and products. The benefits ripple outward: less waste and emissions, new revenue for businesses, hands-on learning for students, and a powerful reminder to communities that waste has value. The big takeaway is that circular innovation doesn't have to be complicated. Even something as ordinary as a cup of coffee can fuel a loop that creates food, products, and education while cutting emissions. The coffee waste loop is more than recycling, it's systems thinking in action. By simply changing how we handle used coffee grounds, what was once waste becomes the input for mushroom kits and bioplastic cups. This creates feedback loops that cut landfill waste, lower methane emissions, and reduce demand for virgin plastics. A reinforcing cycle where each benefit multiplies the next. The leverage point is small, diverting grounds from trash to processing. But the ripple effects are huge, unlocking environmental gains, new revenue streams, green jobs, and community engagement. It shows how one simple redesign can deliver big impacts across the system, turning a disposal problem into an opportunity for regeneration. Nature has perfected loops where nothing is wasted, but human systems often break them. Food scraps go to landfills instead of soil. Packaging is used once and pollutes oceans, and nutrients that could regenerate gardens are simply lost. The good news is that broken loops are also opportunities, and fixing even one can start real change. Think about our own school. Could the cafeteria separate food scraps for compost? Could we cut single-use packaging with reusable bottles or containers? Or could a student-led garden use compost to close the nutrient loop? Take a few minutes to think on your own, then pair up and share ideas. And finally, we'll chart the class's suggestions together. Remember, system change doesn't have to start big. It can begin with one loop repaired right here on campus. This activity is about using systems thinking to compare how nature works versus how our cafeteria works, and to see what we can learn from those differences. In small groups, you'll first map a forest. Its inputs like sunlight and rainfall, its processes like photosynthesis and decomposition, and its outputs like oxygen and organic matter. Notice the closed feedback loops, like the nutrient and carbon cycles, where nothing is wasted. Then, you'll map our cafeteria as a system. Its inputs like food shipments and packaging, its processes like cooking and eating, and its outputs like meals, waste, and trash. Pay attention to where loops are broken, like food scraps going to landfill or packaging wasted. Finally, you'll place the cafeteria on a donut diagram. Is it falling short socially in nutrition or equity? Overshooting ecologically with waste and emissions? Or somewhere in between? In your reflection, suggest how natural circularity, like composting or food donation, could close the gaps. This side-by-side mapping shows us that nature offers the blueprint, and schools can borrow those patterns to strengthen their own food systems. This activity is about turning breakdowns into opportunities by practicing circular thinking. In small teams, you'll get a broken loop scenario, like a city compost program shutting down and scraps being sent to landfill. Your job is to identify where the loop failed, propose a circular fix, and list the benefits for the environment, economy, and community. Then, sketch a quick before and after diagram to show how waste can flow back into value instead of ending in the trash. Each group will present their rescue plan in 3 simple steps: break, fix, and outcomes. You'll have about 10 minutes to create your plan and 2 minutes to share it. Remember, solutions can be practical or visionary, from farm partnerships to student-run compost bins to wild ideas like algae-powered digesters. The key is systems thinking. Every loop you repair makes the whole food system stronger. Let's close with a quick review. First, how does nature show us that resources can be reused endlessly without waste? In ecosystems, everything cycles. Leaves decompose into soil, one organism's waste becomes another's food, and nutrients circulate again and again, making nature the ultimate circular system. Second, what framework defines the environmental limits humanity must stay within to keep Earth stable? That's the Planetary Boundaries framework, which identifies 9 critical thresholds like climate, biodiversity, and nutrient cycles that mark our safe operating space. Finally, what way of thinking helps us connect our food choices to environmental and social impacts? Systems thinking, the practice of seeing relationships and ripple effects, not just isolated parts, so we can understand how diets, waste, farming, and policies all connect. Here are the answers. First, nature demonstrates endless reuse through circular cycles like nutrient loops, where one organism's waste becomes another's resource. This is the model for a circular economy. Second, the framework that defines the environmental limits humanity must stay within is the Planetary Boundaries framework, which identifies 9 critical Earth system thresholds we must not exceed to remain in a safe operating space. Finally, the way of thinking that connects our food system choices to environmental and social impacts is systems thinking, paired with the triple bottom line, considering people, planet, and profit together when making decisions. Lesson C is all about action, the real pathways where change can happen. Diet, innovation, and policy. Think of it this way. If you could make one change in your own eating habits, one change in how a business operates, and one change in government policy, what would they be? Together, these choices shape the future of food systems. Diet shifts can reduce waste, cut emissions, and improve health. Innovation lets businesses and scientists redesign farming, packaging, and byproducts. And policy sets the rules and incentives that reward sustainable practices. There's no single silver bullet, but when diet, innovation, and policy work together, they reinforce each other and drive real transformation. Diet, innovation, and policy are the three levers that can reshape food systems. And while each has power on its own, together they drive the biggest change. Dietary shifts, like eating more plant-based meals, cutting back on red meat, and reducing food waste, ease pressure on land, water, and emissions while improving health. Innovation redesigns production and supply chains, from upcycling byproducts and scaling regenerative farming to using renewable energy and compostable packaging. Policy sets the rules of the game through subsidies, bans, and investments that make sustainable practices the norm. When diet creates demand, innovation supplies solutions, and policy scales them up. The three reinforce each other, and that's how we create lasting, systemic transformation. The beef versus beans comparison shows just how powerful dietary shifts can be. Producing beef takes huge amounts of land, water, and energy and releases methane, a greenhouse gas far stronger than CO2, while beans provide similar protein with only a fraction of the resources and emissions. This simple example proves that even small changes in what we eat can have a big impact on climate, biodiversity, and public health. To see how redesigning diets and food products can create ripple effects across people and the planet, we'll watch a short video. The story of the big food redesign. As you watch, keep this question in mind. How can redesigning what we eat reduce waste and regenerate resources? Afterward, we'll share one surprising fact or connection you noticed. The beef versus beans comparison makes the math clear. Cattle take up about 2/3 of all agricultural land worldwide, but provide only around 3% of global calories, while beans deliver protein with just a fraction of the land, water, and emissions. Per gram of protein, beef produces 10 to 20 times more greenhouse gases than beans, largely due to methane, feed production, and deforestation. That means even small shifts away from red meat can have a bigger climate impact than actions like recycling or taking shorter showers. Beef-heavy diets are an inefficient use of resources, while plant-based proteins like beans, lentils, and peas provide the same nutrition at far lower environmental cost. Scaled globally, these shifts could free land for reforestation, cut emissions, and support healthier diets, showing how powerful personal food choices can be when paired with innovation and policy. The burger to burrito swap shows how small, simple dietary changes can have big impacts. Western diets are especially resource intensive, and studies suggest cutting beef intake by about 90% would be needed to stay within ecological limits. But that doesn't mean everyone has to go vegetarian overnight. Even partial shifts matter. Choosing a bean burrito instead of a beef burger cuts the carbon footprint of that meal by roughly 10 times. One swap may not seem like much, but multiplied across millions of people and billions of meals, the climate savings are enormous. The key takeaway is that change isn't all or nothing. Small, repeated choices add up, empowering individuals to make a real difference while linking what's on our plates to global sustainability goals. Food is deeply personal. It's tied to culture, identity, affordability, and access, which means we should never approach dietary shifts through blame or shaming. Not everyone has the same ability to change what they eat, but when choices are available, they carry real power. Informed eaters steer markets, and farmers follow demand. The rise of plant-based milks or organic produce happened because consumers asked for them, and small shifts in millions of diets add up to massive system change. Cutting beef once a week or adding more plant-based meals may feel small on its own, but together, these choices reshape supply chains and signal new directions for food systems. The key is framing dietary change as empowerment. When culture, access, and affordability are respected, diet becomes one of the most powerful levers for building a more sustainable future. Innovation in food systems isn't just about new technology. It's about rethinking business models so profit and purpose go hand in hand. Entrepreneurs and community enterprises are proving that sustainability can be a growth engine, not a cost. Across the world, startups are turning byproducts into new goods, like citrus peels into animal feed or bioplastics, while others are creating plant-based proteins that use far fewer resources, or packaging that composts instead of polluting. Community kitchens are transforming surplus produce into shelf-stable soups, and breweries are reusing spent grains in bread or animal feed. Each of these examples shows how aligning profit with purpose can cut waste, regenerate resources, and strengthen communities, while reshaping markets to set new standards for the future. Packaging is one of the most visible examples of food system waste, and innovation gives us a chance to rethink it completely. Most single-use plastics from things like yogurt cups end up in landfills or oceans, where they take centuries to break down. But what if packaging never became waste in the first place? Take yogurt cups. The old way combines plastic, foil, and coatings that aren't recyclable, meaning almost all of them are trashed. The redesign uses compostable bioplastic for the cup and fully recyclable foil for the lid, with nothing going to landfill. That one shift eliminates millions of waste items and shows how powerful design can be. Next, you'll try this out yourselves in a design sprint. Your challenge is to redesign a common food package so it keeps resources cycling instead of ending up as trash. Think creatively. Edible packaging, refill systems, anything that reimagines waste as preventable. Urban farming technology is all about shrinking the gap between farm and fork by bringing food production into cities themselves. Instead of relying on long supply chains that create waste and emissions, vertical farms stack crops and buildings. Hydroponics grows plants in nutrient-rich water with less land and water, and aquaponics links fish and plants in a mutually beneficial cycle. These systems deliver fresher food with fewer transport emissions, produce year-round in controlled environments, and can even close the loop by running on renewable energy and recycling city compost into fertilizer. For example, a vertical farm in New York now grows leafy greens year-round with hydroponics and LED lighting powered by renewables, while compost from restaurants feeds the system. It's a glimpse of how innovation can transform cities into sustainable food hubs. Innovation isn't just happening on farms or in factories, it's also digital, with apps that connect surplus food and waste streams to people and new uses in real time. Platforms like Too Good To Go link restaurants, bakeries, and grocery stores with consumers who can buy unsold meals at a discount, saving perfectly good food from the trash. Olio lets neighbors share surplus groceries or cooked meals instead of letting them spoil. Beyond food, waste byproducts are being repurposed. Used cooking oil is turned into biodiesel, and fruit pits and skins become natural textile dyes. These examples show that technology can be as circular as compost or recycling bins, creating invisible networks that keep food in use, cut waste, and build community. It proves that creativity plus connectivity can be just as powerful as any new farming tool. Alternative proteins show how innovation can reinvent food without asking people to sacrifice taste. Since beef has one of the largest footprints in the food system, replacing even part of that demand with new proteins can make a huge difference. Plant-based meats like the Beyond Burger use peas or soy to replicate beef's taste and texture, but with almost 10 times less carbon emissions, far less water, and a fraction of the land. Lab-grown meat, grown directly from animal cells, eliminates the need for massive herds, and insect protein offers a highly efficient option that requires little land or water. Side-by-side comparisons are striking. One beef burger produces 3.7 kilograms of CO2 and uses 438 liters of water, while a Beyond Burger produces just 0.38 kilograms of CO2 and uses 3 liters of water. The calories and protein are almost identical, but the environmental costs couldn't be more different. These innovations prove that sustainability and consumer satisfaction can go hand in hand. And if even a portion of global meat demand shifts to alternatives, we can free land, save water, and cut emissions dramatically. Innovation isn't just an idea. Businesses around the world are already proving that waste can be the foundation for profit and sustainability. Breweries and distilleries turn their spent grain into a growing medium for gourmet mushrooms, which can then still be composted or fed to livestock. Cafes are sending used coffee grounds to entrepreneurs who grow mushrooms or make soil enhancers, creating a loop from waste to food to soil and back again. And in San Francisco, companies collect curbside food scraps from homes and restaurants, converting them into fertilizer pellets and renewable biogas. Each of these examples shows that redesigning waste streams isn't just possible, it's profitable, cutting disposal costs, reducing emissions, and creating new revenue streams. These circular businesses prove that with creativity, every byproduct can become a resource, and they highlight why supportive policies are needed to help scale these solutions. Circular redesign works because it flips the logic of waste. Instead of being a cost, waste becomes a resource that creates new value. Byproducts like spent grain, coffee grounds, or food scraps can generate revenue as mushrooms, soil enhancers, fertilizer, or biogas, cutting disposal costs while creating new products and businesses. These models are usually local, which means more jobs, stronger community food systems, and less dependency on long supply chains. But success also depends on alignment. Producers need to share waste streams, consumers need to embrace new products, and policymakers need to provide the right infrastructure and incentives. When all three work together, circular food models thrive, showing how innovation can deliver economic, social, and environmental benefits at once. Policy is the lever that makes diet shifts and innovation scalable by creating the right incentives for change. Instead of paying farmers only for yields, smart policies can reward ecosystem services, like building carbon-rich soils, capturing carbon, or restoring pollinator habitats, flipping the incentive from produce more at all costs to farm in ways that regenerate land and climate. Subsidies can also be redirected from resource-intensive monocrops toward practices like cover crops, which protect and recycle soil nutrients, or agroforestry, which stabilizes soils and boosts biodiversity. Collective action is key. City governments can drive composting and food recovery programs. Schools can model sustainable procurement and educate future leaders. And financial institutions can invest in circular businesses and regenerative farms. When all of these actors work together, policy becomes the glue that scales solutions into systems change. Food waste targets show how policy can make waste reduction a shared responsibility and drive real results. Globally, SDG 12.3 calls for having food waste by 2030, pushing countries, cities, and businesses to measure and reduce losses. France provides a strong example with its law requiring supermarkets to donate unsold but edible food to charities, turning waste into meals instead of trash. Schools can do the same by redirecting leftover lunches to shelters or compost systems, keeping food out of landfills and building community connections. These policies matter because they reduce methane emissions, cut disposal costs, fight hunger, and return nutrients to soils through composting, proving that rules and targets can turn a massive inefficiency into an opportunity for climate, people, and profit. Cities are where most people live and where most food is consumed, which makes them powerful drivers of change. By adopting food-smart policies, local governments can cut waste, shorten supply chains, and build resilience. Zoning codes can require or incentivize community gardens, rooftop farms, and vertical gardens that put food closer to eaters. Mandatory compost pickup can make diverting food scraps as routine as trash and recycling, turning waste into compost or biogas. Grants and zero-waste targets can spark innovation, funding urban farming projects, packaging redesigns, and food recovery programs. Because cities concentrate both demand and waste, small interventions can ripple quickly across neighborhoods and scale citywide, making urban policies one of the fastest ways to build healthier, more resilient food systems. Incentives and grants help reward good practices, but strong regulations are just as important because they phase out the harmful ones. Smart policies can gradually ban toxic pesticides that damage biodiversity, limit nitrogen fertilizer use that drives water pollution and greenhouse gases, and block imports tied to deforestation from beef, soy, or palm oil. At the same time, tools like carbon or nitrogen pricing can shift the economics of farming, so harmful practices become more expensive and regenerative ones more competitive. Without regulation, destructive practices remain the cheapest option in the short term. But with strong guardrails, policy makes sustainability the smarter economic choice while protecting forests, soils, and water and keeping food systems within planetary boundaries. Policy isn't only about laws and incentives, it's also about leading by example, and public institutions are some of the most powerful tools for change. When schools, hospitals, or city governments adopt sustainable food practices, they create reliable demand for regenerative farmers and show communities what change looks like in practice. Procurement rules that require local or sustainable sourcing shift entire supply chains, and initiatives like Meatless Mondays make sustainability part of daily life, not just a classroom idea. Even this course is a form of policy in action because education itself equips the next generation to rethink food systems and carry those ideas forward. The key point is that when institutions model change on the plate, they normalize it for society, proving that sustainable food isn't abstract, it's practical and achievable. Food policy works best when all levels of governance align, from global treaties down to campus cafeterias. International agreements like the UN Sustainable Development Goals set benchmarks for waste reduction and sustainable farming, while national governments create laws, subsidies, and dietary guidelines that shape food systems. Local governments put policies into practice with compost programs, zoning for gardens, and school procurement rules. And even institutions like campuses or hospitals can lead by example with Meatless Mondays or sourcing from local farms. The key idea is that good policy makes the sustainable choice the easiest and most profitable one. And your voice matters. Advocacy can start small, like pushing for food waste reduction in your school, and ripple outward to influence local, national, and even international change. Food systems are incredibly complex, which means no single hero can fix them. Transformation only happens when everyone plays their part. Farmers adopt regenerative practices and connect to local markets. Food brands redesign products with plant-based proteins and circular packaging. Retailers and restaurants cut waste and normalize sustainable choices. Scientists create new tools. Governments provide incentives and guardrails. And citizens drive demand through what they buy and advocate for. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation calls this an era of unprecedented collaboration, because only when these pieces interlock does the system shift. The big idea here is that system change isn't about one player. It's about farmers, businesses, policymakers, and citizens working together to create a circular, resilient food system for the future. Food systems are too complex for any one actor to fix. Real transformation comes from unprecedented collaboration. Waste management companies can compost and recycle nutrients, but they need city governments to provide infrastructure and procurement rules that support circular practices. Cities depend on financial institutions to de-risk investments so regenerative farms and businesses can grow. Learning institutions advance research, pilot solutions, and educate the next generation, while scientists, farmers, businesses, and citizens innovate, produce, consume, and advocate for change. The big idea is that each holds a piece of the puzzle, and only when those pieces connect do we build resilient, circular food systems. There's no single hero, but together, the network creates the future of food. This gallery walk gives us the chance to step into real-world examples of innovation and policy and think critically about their trade-offs. You'll rotate in small groups through several stations, each highlighting a case study. It might be a city composting mandate, a supermarket donation law, an aquaponics system, or bio-based packaging. At each station, you'll jot down one benefit and one challenge, then move to the next. After we've rotated through all the stations, we'll regroup as a class to discuss which idea seemed most doable in our community and which surprised or inspired you the most. Remember, there are no wrong answers. Every solution has both strengths and challenges. And the goal here is to see how innovation and policy can complement each other in building circular food systems. This reflection is your chance to bring everything we've discussed, diet, innovation, and policy, into your own sphere of action. We've learned that sustainable food systems balance four lenses: Planet, people, profit, and policy. Planet is about protecting soil, water, climate, and ecosystems. People focuses on health, equity, and fair treatment. Profit emphasizes building viable and fair food economies, and policy creates the rules and incentives that scale change. Your task is to pick one or more of these quadrants and jot down an action you could take. Maybe reducing meat, volunteering with a food recovery program, supporting local farmers, or advocating for composting in schools. Take a few minutes to reflect silently, then we'll share out and collect your ideas under the four headings. Remember, no action is too small. Together, they all contribute to building a circular, regenerative food system. As we wrap up, this reflection is your chance to connect everything we've covered, from diet shifts to innovation to policy to your own sphere of action. Sustainable food systems balance four lenses: planet, people, profit, and policy. Planet is about protecting ecosystems through actions like composting or eating less meat. People focuses on equity and health, like volunteering with food recovery or advocating for access. Profit means supporting fair, viable businesses such as local farmers or upcycling enterprises. And policy creates systemic change, like campaigning for composting in schools or healthier lunches. Take a few minutes to pick one or more of these lenses and jot down one action you could take personally, as part of a student group, or in your community. Then we'll share out and gather ideas under each heading, showing how individual actions connect into bigger systems change. Everyone has a role in building sustainable food systems, and those roles evolve over time. The choices we make daily, what we eat, what we waste, what we buy, send signals to markets, and millions of small actions add up to big demand for change. As students, the knowledge you're building now equips you to become tomorrow's entrepreneurs, scientists, policymakers, or community leaders. And you don't have to stick to one hat. At different points in your life, you might be a consumer, an activist, a teacher, or even a lawmaker. The key is to stay curious and committed, because no single role is the hero. Together, as citizens and innovators, we weave the web of transformation that makes food systems sustainable. Let's close with a quick review that connects back to your own prototype ideas. First, what hotspot did you choose, and what kind of waste is there? Cafeteria food scraps, plastic packaging, landscaping waste, or something else? The key is spotting the pain points where loops are broken. Second, what's one benefit and one challenge of your prototype? Benefits might include cutting landfill waste, creating compost for gardens, or saving money, while challenges could be funding, participation, or infrastructure needs. Finally, how could multiple methods work together to close the loop on campus? For example, combining composting with reusable packaging and food donation often creates stronger, more resilient systems than relying on just one fix. Remember, every real-world solution comes with trade-offs, and identifying them is part of systems thinking. Here are some sample answers you might have come up with. For the first question, one hotspot could be the campus dining hall, where the main waste stream is post-consumer food scraps like uneaten meals, fruit peels, and coffee grounds. For the second, a benefit of a prototype system might be turning those scraps into compost or biogas to reduce landfill waste and support the campus garden. While a challenge could be the need for consistent sorting by students and staff plus investment in bins and composting infrastructure. Finally, using multiple methods is often the strongest approach. Combining food donation, composting, and converting cooking oil to biofuel could divert most organic waste from landfills and close nutrient and energy loops on campus. Module 1 shows us that sustainable food systems depend on balance, loops, and levers. First, we have to balance people and planet, feeding communities while protecting ecosystems so systems last. Second, we need to close loops, moving away from the old linear model of take, make, waste, and instead designing circular systems where nutrients, water, and energy keep cycling, just like in nature. Third, real transformation requires pulling on all three levers: diets, innovation, and policy, because no single solution is enough on its own. And finally, action should always be guided by evidence. Whether it's composting, food recovery, or regenerative agriculture, even one concrete step can start momentum. The challenge is big, but the opportunity is just as big. Every choice we make can help redesign food systems to regenerate instead of deplete. This mind map ties everything together, showing how today's topics connect into one big picture of sustainable and circular food systems. At the core are people, planet, and profit, which link directly to lessons on planetary boundaries, circular economy, and systems thinking. Around that core are the three pathways of action: diet, innovation, and policy, each reinforcing the others and tying back to global sustainability goals. As we move through each branch, think about examples we've covered, like beef versus beans for diet, mushroom loops for innovation, or food waste laws for policy. Notice how the branches overlap, because in real food systems, nothing exists in isolation. It's all interdependent, and systems thinking helps us see those connections. Food systems careers are diverse and growing, and they span three main areas: policy, innovation, and science. In policy and governance, you might work as a food systems planner or compliance officer, shaping programs that reduce waste or expand urban farming. In innovation and business, you could be an entrepreneur redesigning packaging, developing alternative proteins, or running a startup that upcycles food waste. And in science and technology, you might research regenerative agriculture, design hydroponic systems, or analyze data to make supply chains more sustainable. Each role looks different day to day, but all contribute to building circular food systems. As you think about your own future, ask yourself, which area excites you most? Shaping rules and programs? Inventing new solutions? Or applying science and tech? And why? In this module, you've seen how food systems shape planetary boundaries, climate, and communities, and why business as usual isn't enough. Now it's your turn to step into the role of systems thinkers and problem solvers through three hands-on activities designed as part of Module 1. In HOAA, Global Food Systems Mapping, you'll build a visual map connecting how food is produced, moved, eaten, and wasted to planetary boundaries and sustainable development goals. In HOAB, the Bottle Compost and Decomposition Challenge, you'll turn trash into a living experiment to see how different materials break down and how waste can become a resource. And in HOAC, the Low Impact Diet Challenge, you'll redesign your own meals using data to calculate how simple swaps on your plate can translate into real reductions in emissions, water use, and waste, showing that circular food systems are something you can start building right now.